and moves were made. Hands were shook, money exchanged hands, possibly drugs. But it was all good. It was all in the name of fantasy football.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Dynasty. Like I said, we all see things differently.
Put it on his shirt. I
Yes,
just
they do.
drank what tasted like a root beer, but now I'm feeling kind of tipsy.
Ride that unicorn, my friend.
I was really going to do an awful Mexican accent, but I realized how mad I'd be at someone else for doing that. So, hi.
We all are very intrigued and very interested in what will happen this year.
It's Tuesday night, 10:58 in the p.m. It's a late one. I am Peter Livingston. This is the Dynasty podcast. It is a seasonal fantasy football podcast in which 12 friends enter, one leaves champion. Probably the best keeper league you've ever heard of. But here we are, week 3. Thank you so much for listening. This one's late. I apologize. I'm going to try and get this one done fairly quick because I waited a little too late to do this one. So I'll see how it goes. But big week 3. Hope everybody had a good week. I know I had some fun, kind of, but we'll get into that. Got a lot of things to talk about. News and notes. We have waiver wire, as always, coming up on Wednesday. And about an hour away from that, waiver wire free agency. The bar set pretty low. I think Elliott set it at like 0.5. He doesn't even think that there's going to be one. I think there might be one or two people. I would probably set it at 1.5. 1.5 is probably what I would set it at. But I think that there might be one or two people getting picked up. But we'll get into that in a little bit. First, let's go ahead, dive into news and notes. And then we'll go into the recap. That was week 3. Not the best fantasy week. Lot of low scores. The ones that weren't low, they were pretty explosive, but for the most part, really low scoring week in fantasy football. And this whole season, this whole first part of the season has been really interesting. In some ways, there's been some nice surprises. Kareem Hunt has been wonderful. Actually, I would say all the rookie running backs have been performing admirable, which is very rare. This is probably going to go down in history as one of the best running back classes, maybe in the NFL. I don't know. That's kind of a big statement, but we do know that they're performing very well through the first 3 weeks. It's been living up to the hype that we were hearing about all the preseason. So, news and notes, looking at some of the, I guess, major injuries that we had. I think immediately we have to go to Mike Crabtree, chest injury. I don't think that they've set a hard date on when he would be set to return, but that is, I mean, without a doubt, he's been healthy the past few years. He had a couple of seasons when he was with San Francisco where he kind of struggled to stay healthy, and we've seen what he's capable of doing when he was healthy. And the extent of the injury, like I said, hasn't been set in stone, but chest injuries can tend to take a few weeks. Of course, that has to boost a couple of the other people around Michael Crabtree, notably Amari Cooper. And you have to think when they get to the red zone, the one person they're really going to be focusing on in terms of punching it in is going to be Marshawn Lynch. So you have to think that those two guys are going to get a good boost. But, David Carr losing his best red zone option, can't be happy about that. Not in the least bit. This, of course, affects Elliott the most, who had Michael Crabtree. But whether he decides to play through it or not, we'll see. He only got 3 targets last week because of the injury, 1 reception, 7 yards. So we'll see what happens. I I think my personal thought, like I am some professional, is that they'll probably hold them out on the road at Denver. I mean, it is a divisional game, so maybe just try and play through it. But you almost wonder if they just kind of try and cut their losses, get them healthy, get them back, because they have a pretty good stretch. Baltimore, KC, Chargers, and then on the road to Buffalo, Miami. So they got a lot of divisional games coming up in the next few weeks. But yeah, Michael Crabtree, probably one of the biggest, I would say probably one of the big injuries. There's a lot of people that had scares, left the game, came back. Jordan Howard bounced back really big this week. Shoulder, obviously not an issue. So that was a big relief to owners everywhere, especially to Tim. And we'll talk about that performance in a minute. But outside of that, not a whole lot. You know, you have people that are still working through things. Thomas Rawls, right? DJ, he's out. Darren Sproles. Not that he had a huge effect in our league, but he was you could say the number one running back out in Philadelphia. And he might be done. His career might be over. Longtime fan of his from his days in San Diego all the way up through Philadelphia. He's been a very solid number 2 running back and had a couple monster games. And it's always sad to see him go out like that. A very similar injury to DJ, actually, with the wrist, and then I think one of his knees, he had some type of damage there. But again, that's not going to greatly affect any team directly in the Dynasty, but it does, the emerging running back by committee that is Philadelphia. Is this an opportunity for anybody to step up and make any type of fantasy impact? I think that's something that's going to be pretty interesting to watch over the next few weeks. Same thing out in Arizona. Kyren Williams looking not that great. We touched on Thomas Rawls. And that's about it in terms of injuries. If we're going to move on to transactions, we did have a couple of transactions take place in our league. Fairly active weekend, I would say. A couple of game time decisions. Some of the ads, Kirk Cousins was picked up by Elliott on the 23rd, as was the New England defense by Matt Keyser on the 24th. Late evening pickup for Elliott, early morning pickup for Braggadocious. Joe, of course, dropped Kirk Cousins. Earlier in the week, Elliott dropped Jay Cutler, picked up Cousins, and Cousins had a pretty decent game, and we'll go into that. He dropped 26 points, 3 touchdowns, 365, so that was a good pickup. Jacksonville defense was picked up by Keyser, Braggadocious, but then was dropped, and he regretted that, but it didn't matter because he played me. And then Marquise Lee was dropped by Elliott, and then he picked up Danny Amendola. Chris Johnson was picked up by Scott of Sparty Party, and then Pat rolling the dice on Deshaun Watson, which I thought was kind of cool, going with the little rookie quarterback action, and he could have some explosive games. He's shown that he has the ability to break off long improvised touchdown runs, which in our league is very valuable. And we'll see if he can keep that going. He had 22 points against New England. He could be a fun start. So in terms of transactions going forward, there are some, I think, intriguing players that are available come waiver wire. If we're going to look at waiver priority right now, Tim is standing at the number 1 spot, followed by Brienne at number 2 waiver priority, Matt Keyser 3, and then Elliott 4, Nate Silver 5th. So you never know. Maybe some of the other people might put in a waiver claim targeting somebody maybe that nobody else is probably looking to use a waiver on, but maybe they're waiting for free agency and they want to swoop in. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. Tim, good bounce back week for him. Does he go target anybody? I don't know. I think he might hold on to that number 1 waiver priority. I think that there will be a waiver claim, though. I really do. I think that when you look at the available talent, I think that there has to be at least one. Looking at wide receivers currently available, Allen Hurns, who just had a good game. Well, the England game against the Baltimore Ravens, which was an absolute blasting. He's now has 2 games in a row with touchdowns, 14 points and 8 points respectively. 7 targets, 6 receptions, and then 3 targets, 3 receptions. And that was more of a product of, well, the fact that Mercedes Lewis caught 3 touchdowns. I still don't think anybody will roster him, but the fact that they were up by so much and they were just kind of burning clock at that point. But you're seeing Jacksonville open it up a little bit more. Blake Bortles isn't looking so Bortly. So I think he could be an intriguing option. Travis Benjamin is also available with the Chargers. He had a big game, 105 yards, 8 targets, 5 receptions. That came off the heels of a 1.68. He did have 10 points week 1. So it's, do you buy into Travis Benjamin? Is he somebody you can rely on every week? Maybe not. But as we're seeing, he has the potential to give you a big game every once in a while. It's just the fact that there's a lot of weapons there. You're kind of just rolling the dice with them. But he's showing that he's capable. Brandon Coleman, also available. Didn't do too much this past week. Only 1 target, 1 reception, but it was for a touchdown. That's 2 games in a row in which he has touchdowns. Only 4% owned. Is he worth a waiver claim? I don't think so. But if you're looking at people that need wide receivers, I think you could see Allen Hurns or Travis Benjamin getting looked at in terms of waivers. But everybody else is kind of these spot starters. You're looking at Mohamed Sanu, Benny Fowler still up there, but he's basically riding the week 1 blow up that he had. And then do you take a look at Cordell Patterson out of Oakland with the fact that Cooks is gone? You know, maybe he gets involved in the offense a little bit more. It'll be interesting to see. And then, of course, you have Arizona, Jaron Brown, 6 targets, 2 receptions, 27 yards, and a touchdown this past week. Off the heels of the J.J. Nelson 16-point blow-up performance, was non-existent this week. It was really interesting. And Brown looked pretty good, not going to lie. And then he's going up and facing San Francisco at home. So there's a lot of people to look at. Geronimo Allison had a big play, kind of saved his night. Gave him 122 yards receiving. So there's a lot of people to look at in terms of wide receiver. Then, of course, Marquise Lee also. I think that there's going to be a lot of adds and drops this week. Running backs, LeGarrette Blount's sitting there. You know, is he a guy that people are going to make a claim on? I think he definitely could be. After 0 dropping a goose egg in week 2 in which he had no attempts, he gets 12 attempts for 67 yards and a touchdown, and then he had 10 points in week 1. So there's really 3 people that you're looking at there. Blunt, Smallwood, and then the rookie that scored a touchdown late. I don't know if he would have much of a role. I can't remember his name right now. But, Corey Clement, excuse me. Maybe he's somebody who wants to roll the dice on. It's another one of those backfields where hopefully somebody emerges, but that's up in the air. I think if anybody's going to be going after running backs, it's going to be either Smallwood or Blunt. I could see both of them getting claimed off waivers. I know that Joe is probably regretting not having Blunt a little bit and maybe might make a claim on him. Smallwood, pretty intriguing. There was lots of chatter about him earlier in the preseason. Hasn't really performed up to snuff. Only 9% owned in leagues. So I think those are the 2 front runners. Everybody else, I don't really know. Andre Ellington had a very solid game last week, but he's definitely in a big time share. So a lot of things to look at there. And then, of course, if you like Matt Forte, he's also there too. So you have kind of these fringe guys. LeGarrette Blount is the biggest name on there, and Wendell Smallwood, like I said, those are probably the 2 that would, if people were going to make a claim, it would probably be one of them. So that is kind of the lay of the land for a league right now in terms of waivers. There are some options. Nobody as big as a Tyreek Cohen or anything like that we've had in weeks past. But there are some options, and I think that we're going to see a little bit of moving and shaking this week. Let's go on and break down week 3 games. Try and get through these pretty quickly. We'll start with the He-Man Woman Haters Club. And we'll start with Robin Fartapocalypse going into week 3 as the number 1 team in the Dynasty, taking his 2-0 record to Scott Sparty Party. Projection 120 to 87 in favor of Robin. Final score was 71.6 to 68.9. In which Kareem Hunt saved Robin again with a 24-point performance. Essentially the only person that performed for Robin this past week. Everybody else, for the most part, did okay. There was just no touchdowns. Carr only got him 7 out of a projected 19. Julio Jones had 91 yards, which is respectable. Demaryius Thomas also had 98 yards, so 9.8 points. Devontae Adams was 6 points, which is kind of what you expect out of him. What you really want out of him is the touchdowns. And then Shady McCoy didn't have much of a performance, only 6.9 points. But Kareem Hunt with 24, 172 rushing yards with the touchdown. My goodness, I mean, the guy is just Superman right now. Big play after big play. And then the goose egg from Hunter Henry against Kansas City. Then negative 4 points from the Baltimore defense. That looked like a game where they were just like, I think they just wanted to just show up and then leave, because it was horrible. Horrible game. Scott, meanwhile, really big game from Dak Prescott. He needed Prescott to have a big game. He got it for him. Rushing touchdown, 2 passing touchdowns, 183 passing yards. Great performance. And it looked, he really did. Dak took over the game. He kind of sparked the offense after his rushing touchdown. And then the game just turned into a shootout. It was a lot of fun, entertaining games. They weren't necessarily great for fantasy, but they were still entertaining nonetheless. But Dak Prescott, that's the kind of game that you're hoping to see out of him. Really started using his legs. Like I said, it energized the offense on the road at Arizona. got the win. It was really big. And then Ted Ginn Jr. doing what you're hoping to get from him, 44 yards, 15 rushing yards, and a touchdown. But everybody else, very nondescript. 1.5 points from Tyrell Williams, Nelson Aguilar with 2 points, Theo Riddick, 3.8 points, and Samaje Perine, part of the Washington running back trio, 3.5 points. Austin Hooper, only 9 receiving yards, giving him roughly a point. Scott did go with Chris Johnson, made the pickup. He got some good work. Didn't have a lot to show for it, though. To be fair, when Chris Johnson was in, it was pretty obvious that they were running downs and they weren't fooling the defense for Dallas whatsoever. And Detroit defense, another solid game. I think that's the third game in a row with the touchdown. And no, second out of 3, but 13 points, 3 interceptions, 2 sacks, and a touchdown. Man, and that's with giving up 30 points. It's just absolutely amazing. So, Robin, a win's a win. The man will take it. Sammy Watkins blew up for 22 points on his bench. That definitely could have helped him feel a little bit better going into Monday. But, man, it's got to be nice to have Kareem Hunt. Let's move on to the next game, which is, let's do my game. Fighting Sponges against Braggadocious, 1-1. The 0-2 Sponges to face a 1-1 Braggadocious. Projections 112 to 129 in favor of Keyser. The final score 133 to 55, in which I took a shellacking. My team again failed to perform. Aaron Rodgers, pretty much the only person that did anything for me. 25 points. Terrell Pryor, 1.9. Evans, yeah, everybody bad. Ingram, 8.6 points. Insanely frustrating performances all around. Jack Doyle got me negative points against Cleveland because Jack Doyle. And Carolina got me a goose egg against New Orleans. So it was horrible all around. I think a lot of things. And none of them good. Still not giving up on the year, though. On my bench, Alvin Kamara got 10 points. Bilal Powell, also 10 points. And Devontae Foreman, 9 points. So some action going on there on the bench, but that's about it. And then Matt Keyser, everybody had a touchdown. And it was essentially how I predicted. The only person that... Drew Brees, monster game, 20 points. A.J. Green, 17. Antonio Brown, 17. Melvin Gordon, 14. Le'Veon Bell, 16. Rob Gronkowski, 15. Matt Prater, 19 points. Not much I could do about that. Matt Keyser goes to 2-1. 5th place. I fall to 0-3. 10th place. It's not looking good for me. Let's go ahead and move on to Nate Silver Sith against Bake Bree, 2-1, 0-3. We all knew that Elliott was going to win this one. We just didn't know it was going to be this close. Original projection 93 to 92, finished at 70 to 63. This was a scary one. Michael Crabtree went out with the injury. Essentially, Kirk Cousins saved Elliott this week. And with Brienne, excuse me, not a great performance all around, but Duke Johnson had a monster game, 16 points, and then Matt Bryant, 14 points. I mean, these kickers have been really good this year. But again, it just kind of shows you that this week was very volatile for scoring. A lot of really close games. Arizona, 0 points for the defensive side. Austin Safarian-Jenkins, picked up by Elliott, had a pretty solid first outing, 31 yards, which is, for tight ends this year, that would be a very good game. And then Christian McCaffrey had an awesome game, about 120 all-purpose yards, no touchdowns, but it's just going to show that he's just going to continue to get more work, especially with the injury to Greg Olsen and then Funchess. Or excuse me, not Devin Funchess, Kelvin Benjamin. So I think he's going to get a lot more passing work and could be an intriguing option, I think, in terms of upside. I think you're really going to start to see them lean on him just a little bit more going forward, and I think you're going to see him out there maybe worked out into the slot like we saw a lot earlier in the year, and you're going to see a lot of Stewart and McCaffrey on the field at the same time because they got to get their playmakers going, and the fact that Cam Newton was benched at the end of the game, Anderson came in and took over. Is that what's going to happen in week 2? Who knows? Right now I think anything could be an upgrade over Cam. When you look at the benches, both teams can point to their benches and say, I could have started this guy. Thielen and Thompson for Elliott, 24.8 points from Thompson. Just another monster game. 3 straight weeks, 12, 23, 24 points. Thielen, bounce back game, really solid, 100 yards. And then Brian, pretty good. It was a garbage game, but Jameis Winston, 18.5 points going up against Minnesota. Could have started him, but you wouldn't have. And then Chris Hogan, 18 points, 2 touchdowns, 68 yards receiving. And then Kyle Rudolph, only 4 receiving yards at tight end, was really weird. Especially when 34 points were scored in a game. He's such a good tight end. All this talk about how they want to utilize him more this year, get the ball in his hands. They know he's an amazing blocker, but my goodness, 4 receiving yards. Really couldn't believe that. Cameron Brate, solid game. 1 touchdown, 33 yards on Brand's bench. That's tough. Especially since it was on the road at Minnesota, getting the touchdown, 33 yards. Kyle Rudolph at home against Tampa Bay. Fantasy football, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go ahead and move on to the Golden Tate Warriors and Belching Beavers. Marcos at 0-2. Maddie at 1-1, or 2-0. Going in this game. Original projection was 118-99 in favor of the Golden Tate Warriors. Final score 140-99 in favor of Marcos, the Belching Beavers. His team has woken up. Sadly for Matt, he had a couple duds, but I still don't think that there was anything he could have done to really stop Marcos, who all across the board, super solid performances. Tom Brady for Matt was just on another planet. 5 touchdowns, almost 400 passing yards and a 2-point conversion, 35 points. You would think that if you got that big chunk that would be a huge help, but it clearly wasn't enough. Even with the 19, 13, and 12 points from Freeman, Parker, and Tate, Marcos, his team finally did what you thought it could do. Mariota, 20 points. Brandon Cooks, 27 points. Monster game. T.Y. Hilton caught a touchdown pass, and a long one at that, 153 yards. Doug Baldwin with a monster game. He had an injury too. That's another one of those ones in which we don't quite know the extent of the injury. It's groin related. He may play, he may not play. And then Leonard Fournette was just a meat grinder. It was one of those games where he just got a good amount of work, 17 attempts, 59 yards and a touchdown, and also caught the ball a little bit too. 21 receiving yards, and you like to see that. And then Joe Mixon, very good game, 62 yards, 39 receiving yards. Zach Ertz doing Zach Ertz things, and then Pierre Garçon on Thursday night, 142 yards. Just made some absolutely sick plays. Look at the benches. DeMarco Murray was on the bench. We all thought he wasn't going to play, but the man looked fine. 18 points, 115 rushing yards with the touchdown against Seattle. It was just, the guy's a monster. And then, surprisingly, Rashard Matthews, Tennessee Titans, busted out the big game. 10 targets, 6 receptions, 87 yards, and a touchdown on the bench from Matt. Still wouldn't have helped, though. Marcos moves to 1-2. Matt falls to 2-1. Heck of a game by Marcos. High score for the week. We have 2 more games to do. Let's go ahead and do Car Ramrod, which is Joe, and then the Burt Churgs, which is Timbo. And I think you can tell by those team names, Tim went down this week. Joe goes to 3-0. Tim goes to 1-2. Projection was 113 to 105 in favor of Joe. Final score was 135 to 123. Another crazy game. Joe had a 50-something point lead going into the night game. Tim needed big performances from Ezekiel Elliott and Larry Fitzgerald, Jason Witten, and Dan Bailey. And he got it for the most part. Larry Fitzgerald had a 20-point game, 150 yards receiving with a touchdown. Ezekiel Elliott, 80 yards, touchdown. Very Ezekiel Elliott game. On the road, good defense. Looks super solid. But, Jason Witten, Arizona continues the streak against tight ends. Tim goes down by 12. And with Dan Bailey as the kicker, it was one of those deals where he was either going to just kick a bunch of PATs or kick field goals, and if you're kicking field goals, you're not scoring touchdowns. So wasn't the best bet going into that game. Little too invested in Dallas, I think, and it might have come back to bite Tim. But if you have to look at the pluses for both these guys, of course, Joe has to feel happy about the performance from Odell Beckham, 2 touchdowns, Jordy Nelson, 2 touchdowns, Carlos Hyde, 2 touchdowns, Todd Gurley, 3 touchdowns. So there was a lot of scoring going on. And then for Tim, I think he has to feel really encouraged by the fact that Jordan Howard is back to being the best running back in Chicago. 26 points against Pittsburgh. Just the guy's amazing. I mean, regardless of offensive line, regardless of having no wide receivers, it's another special running back that Tim has in his arsenal. I don't think anybody has to be worried about Cohn anymore. When Cohn had the workload by himself, obviously showed that he couldn't handle it. He's more effective when Howard's out there and can be the change of pace or be out there at the same time. So knowing that Howard is back and going to be the cowbell, Tim has to feel good about that, even though the 26 points were for naught. And then in terms of bench players, Stephon Diggs for Joe, one of those things where he has to be happy that he had 29 points on the night, but of course has to be said that he was on this bench. But him and Case Keenum figured something out. I know teams are notoriously bad at Pittsburgh on the road, and that's what they had in week 2. But week 3 against a not very good Tampa Bay defense, him and Case Keenum, 11 targets, 8 receptions, almost 200 yards receiving, and 2 touchdowns. Pretty big stuff. They do have Detroit next week, which would be a tough matchup. And then, of course, Russell Wilson, 4 passing touchdowns, 375 passing yards with 26 rushing yards. Huge game. I think he was the number 2 quarterback this week. another one of those things where Joe has to feel good that he gave that kind of performance. Just a shame that it was on the bench. He could have used these points to help him get the points lead, but sadly, they were for naught. Also, Taylor Gabriel had a big play, 79 yards and receiving touchdown for Tim on the bench. The Atlanta offense, it was a really weird game. Matt Ryan had 3 interceptions. The weird thing about that was that they were all through wide receivers' hands, which you don't see a lot out of Atlanta. The wide receivers the past few years have been really, really good, and last week just a lot of weird drop balls and balls going through hands and getting batted up in the air. So good thing is that Matt Ryan will be facing Buffalo at home next week, and good performances both teams. 135, 123 points. It's kind of what these two teams are going to do going forward. A lot of big games from Tim, I'm sure, and I think Joe's going to have a lot of big games too. So I think both guys are happy to have this matchup over and done with for the year. And then the last game that I'm going to go through, we have Pat, a team has no name, 1-1 against Tahir, 2-0. Original projection 110-92 in favor of Tahir. It finished at 76-61 were the total points in favor of Tahir, who moves to 3-0. A lot of low scores this week. A lot of low scores. Calvin Benjamin, of course, gets injured. Wide receiver, Tyreek Hill, monster game, 15 points. And then Cook had his big breakout for Minnesota, 22 points on 97 yards rushing with the touchdown and 72 yards receiving. The Tampa Bay defense is not very good. And then looking over at Pat's team, I mean, overall, you kind of look at it, he got a couple good games. Deshaun Jackson, 84 yards and a touchdown. Like, that's what you're really hoping for from Deshaun Jackson. Chris Carson looked really good at running back for Seattle, and Pat's definitely hoping that maybe he has the next good running back of the future there. And he very well could. And then Amir Abdullah had a solid game. 8.6 points. No touchdown, but was very versatile in both his rushing and receiving. A lot of attempts, not a very good average, but he's producing, and that's all you can really hope for. Looking at the bench, finally out in New York, or I guess Jersey, where the Jets are, Robbie Anderson finally had the game that everybody's hoping for. Only 3 receptions, but he has 95 yards and a touchdown. He was the guy that everybody was hoping that he would be the guy out there in New York, and hopefully this will spark something for him. And then on the bench for Tahir, Jamal Charles got a touchdown. Hey, got to be happy about that. And then also for Pat, Cam Newton just may not be rosterable anymore. I don't know. 3 interceptions, 167 passing yards. They went to Anderson. This could be the end of Cam Newton. It's starting to look that way. I think that, it's sad to say, from MVP in the Super Bowl to, blowing out his shoulder, and looks like he might be done. I don't know. We'll see what they do in terms of whether they go with Anderson or Newton going forward, but I don't know. Maybe he came back too early or something. But I say that because of the Deshaun Watson picked up, as I alluded to earlier in the podcast, 301 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and 41 rushing yards at New England too. I mean, almost pulled out the upset. 36-33, Houston loses. He's a lot of fun to watch. I watched that game, and I think, for Pat, who has really nothing to lose, it's going to be fun to probably start him every week and see what he does. Only 15% owns in leagues, but he could be one of those quarterbacks of the future. And that is your week 3. Let's go ahead and do the breakdown of the divisions, starting with the He-Man Woman Haters Club, the number 1 team, 3-0 with 339 points for is Robin. Right behind him after the monster week that he had this week, 138 points, Joe, Team Car Ramrod. He switched from team after he won his 3rd game and is now at 329 on the year, roughly 10 points behind Robin. Then Marcos, with his win, goes to 1-2 on the year with 291 points for. And then Brienne in 4th place in the division at 0-3, 205 points for. Moving down to the Bad Sports Pun division, the number 1 team in the division and number 3 in the league, the Golden Tate Warriors at 2-1 with 336 points for. We're going to have a battle for points, I think. And then the number 5 team, second in the division, Braggadocious 1-1, also at 2-1. He's 1-1 in the division, 308 points for. The number 9 team, number 3 in the division, Pat, a team has no name, 1-2, 1-1 in the division, 204 points for. And then Scott at 0-3 with 179. Moving down to the Roger God Elliott division, the number 2 team in the league, number 1 in the division at 3-0, 281 points for Tahir, followed by the number 6 team, or Commissioner Nate Silver Siths, in second place at 2-1, 1-1 in the division, 247 points for, followed by the Birchurgs. Tim had to change his logo to, it looks like the black and yellow construction sign of a guy laying down with his feet in the air and a buddy helping him funnel beer into his butthole. It's an awesome thing to be seen. The Birchurgs, the number 7 team in the league, at 1-2 record with 298 points for, 299 against. Second, well, actually, I don't have the roto in front of me. I can't remember, but good roto week for Tim this week. And then me, the 10th place team, 4th in the division, 0-3, 248 points for, 0-2 in the division, 352 against. I like that I'm getting everybody's best shot. It's been amazing. 352 against. A lot of fun. I love it. All right, so that's week 3. Tomorrow we'll do the recap. We'll look at week 4. And that should be a lot of fun. Hope everybody enjoyed it. Hope everybody had a good week 3. We will look at waivers. We'll recap that. See who got picked up on free agency, who got dropped. We have Patty projections, I believe. And then we'll also have Robin doing his waiver report card, which is always fun to do. And maybe I'll have somebody on tomorrow. We'll see. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Hit me up on Twitter at Peter Livingston, or shoot us an email at ffdynastypod@gmail.com. It's a lot of fun. Thank you guys so much for listening. Hope your week 3 was better than mine. Good night.